we've got a government that is racking up the bills of borrowing, borrowing for economic failure, not to invest in schools and hospitals, we face a choice as a Labour Party. Second biggest generator of offshore wind, but we're not yet generating the jobs. Our plans, Great British Energy, the National Wealth Fund, giving incentives to invest in British manufacturing.
Remember when Ed Miliband promised your energy bills would go down? Well, they've just risen for the third time in a row, hitting £1,849. That's £925 more per month coming out of your pocket. In this explosive footage, watch as Miliband squirms uncomfortably when confronted with his own promises on live television. His carefully crafted, clean, homegrown power narrative crumbles under the simplest questioning, revealing the truth behind Labour's energy policy disaster. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favour. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Remember when Labour promised your energy bills would fall by £300? It was one of their main campaign pledges, repeated endlessly by Ed Miliband himself. He stood there looking you straight in the eye, absolutely certain that his grand, clean power scheme would slash your costs. Not might, not could. Would. The conviction was impressive, wasn't it? Too bad it was complete fantasy.
What a majority Labour government.
It's unlikely you'll get one.
Let's see what happens, but the thing I would say is, whatever happens, I'll put forward my proposals in my manifesto. That's what I'm going to do. This government proposed action in Syria, the bombing of Syria, right? I was called into a room by David Cameron and Nick Clegg because President Obama had been on the phone.
Fast forward to today, and Ofgem has just announced yet another price cap increase, this time by 6.4%. That's the third consecutive rise since Labour took office. So much for those falling bills, eh? While Miliband promised savings, the average British household is now staring at annual energy costs of £1,849. That's real money coming out of real people's pockets, while politicians continue crafting clever excuses. What's particularly galling is watching Miliband's rhetorical gymnastics. Before the election, it was all bills will come down by £300, with absolute certainty. Now suddenly, he's pivoted to vague promises about clean homegrown power as some distant solution. Notice how he never actually addresses the broken promise, never explains why your bills keep climbing instead of falling. That's not an oversight, it's deliberate avoidance. The gap between political promises and painful reality grows wider by the day. That promised £300 reduction hasn't just failed to materialise, it's transformed into a staggering £925 per month increase for millions of British families. Think about what that means for the average household budget. While you're cutting back on essentials, turning down the heating, or worrying about next month's bills, the architects of these failed policies enjoy the luxury of never having to say, "I was wrong."
Different policy that we're talking about, John. It's a 1% pay rise on average across the public sector. It's not what the government proposed for the first period of this parliament. It's the essence of our economic crisis was a global financial crash. The Tories definitely say...
In which the Labour government played a major role. But you've been candid, you've forgotten. How could you forget something?
And here's where it gets truly interesting. When finally confronted about this spectacular failure on live television, Miliband's carefully constructed facade begins to crumble. His confident pre-election persona disappears, replaced by a squirming politician desperately trying to avoid the simple question: why are bills going up when you promised they'd go down? Politicians train for years to handle tough interviews, but when fantasy meets reality on live television, even the most polished performers crack under pressure. The moment Miliband faced direct questioning about rising energy costs, we witnessed a rare political spectacle. His confident facade crumbled in real time, revealing the hollow promises beneath. The interview started innocently enough. A straightforward question about why energy bills were increasing rather than decreasing as promised. But watch closely as Miliband's demeanour shifts. The slight tightening around his eyes, the defensive posture, the sudden hand gestures betraying his discomfort. These aren't the actions of a man confident in his policies. Instead of addressing the broken promise head-on, Miliband immediately retreated to the politician's favourite shelter: blame someone else. The only way to bring bills down, he stammered, is to have clean homegrown power that we control.
The leader of the free world, right? I listened to what they said, and over those days I made up my mind and we said no. Right controls, but we've also got to change the way our economy works. So we properly enforce the minimum wage, don't allow people to be exploited and wages to be undercut.
Notice the sleight of hand. He's not explaining why his previous guarantee failed, but pivoting to a future solution that conveniently requires no accountability today. The most revealing moment came when Miliband desperately pointed fingers at petro-states and dictators, suggesting these external forces were entirely responsible for Britain's energy woes. This defensive posture exposed the fundamental contradiction in Labour's position. If global markets dictate energy prices, how could Miliband have promised with such certainty that bills would fall? What's particularly damning is that expert analysis doesn't support his excuse. While international markets certainly influence energy pricing, they don't explain why British consumers pay some of the highest electricity rates in Europe. If neighbouring countries face the same global pressures but maintain lower prices, what does that say about Labour's energy strategy? The circular logic becomes almost comical.
But look, obviously we know we've got more to do, and part of what I'm doing in my job, I was out yesterday with Keir Starmer talking about our plans for new nuclear, is driving economic growth. But what I'm not going to do is repeat the mistakes of the 2003 Iraq War, which happened when Labour was in power, which is a rush to war without knowing what your strategy is.
The solution to high energy costs is apparently clean homegrown power. The very policy approach that has so far delivered exactly zero relief to struggling households. It's like promising a boat will stop sinking, if only you drill more holes in the hull. Under even modest scrutiny, Miliband's carefully crafted narrative completely collapsed. The interview exposed the chasm between political rhetoric and the harsh reality facing millions of British families. The practiced talking points, the deflections, the finger-pointing, all crumbled against the simple weight of facts. Let's face it, the trust between politicians and the British public is broken beyond repair. And with good reason. With only 18% of people believing politicians tell the truth about energy costs.
Making promises on an IOU. And that's why we've said we'll have a mansion tax on homes above £2 million, crack down on tax avoidance by the hedge funds, money from the tobacco company.
Is this to try to normalise yourself? Do you see yourself as in some way not normal? Why do you need to conjure all these people to make your case?
No, it's to change get out of the Westminster bubble.
We're witnessing a crisis of credibility that extends far beyond Ed Miliband's embarrassing TV appearance. This pattern of promising the moon and delivering dust has become the standard operating procedure for our political class. They craft elaborate fantasies during campaigns, then hide behind global market forces when reality comes knocking. Meanwhile, ordinary families across Britain are left footing ever-increasing bills while watching politicians dodge accountability with practiced precision. What we've witnessed isn't merely about one politician's uncomfortable moment or a single broken promise. It's about a systematic betrayal of public trust. When they fail, they never take responsibility. When we suffer, they offer excuses. If you're as tired as I am of politicians treating voters like fools while expecting us to keep quiet about it, join our community. Because sometimes, the only way to get honest answers is to demand them together.